Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this month's Cyber Showcase webinar. I'm your host, Brett Rock, Product Specialist and Business Development Manager here with SBS. If you've sat through any of the Cyber Showcases we've done in the past few months or a track demo in the last 5 to 6 years or so, you've probably at least heard my voice, and I apologize about that. Joining me today is actually somebody I'm very excited about having on board, Eric Chase. He's one of our expert client services folks in terms of information security consulting. If you, unlike me, he's an actual expert. So if you're only going to listen and pay attention to one of us today, I would certainly encourage that be Eric. But with that said, Eric, I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourself real quick.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Well, good afternoon. I've had the privilege of being with SBS for just about 11 years now. I've spent the majority of
Eric,
that
did you get
time.
cut off there?
Oh, I might have gotten cut off here. Can you hear me okay now?
Yep, I can hear you now. Sorry.
No, that's all good. Yeah, good. But yeah, spent the majority of that time here at SBS doing the consulting with our cyber partners and working on fast track consulting. So I've gotten to see the regulatory landscape change pretty significantly in those 10 years and gotten to see the importance of cybersecurity grow from what it was even when I started back in 2012 area. So it's been a really fun experience helping customers, helping get them set up to where they can provide education, meaningful education to both employees and also their customers.
Great. Well, great to have you on board, and certainly I'm gonna, like I said earlier, I'm gonna let you handle a lot of the heavy lifting today. So just from a perspective of what the agenda looks like today, unlike previous cyber showcases where kind of we've done it, talked about a specific aspect of information or cybersecurity, things that you need to do and how SBS might be able to help with that. Our real focus today is with October being Cybersecurity Awareness Month. We want to arm you with as much information, as much content, as many tips and tricks and things as we can give you so that you can be prepared for when October gets here, so you can start rolling that information out to your customers. Certainly, October being Cybersecurity Awareness Month, this is a great time to get started with that. That's not the end of it, hopefully. We obviously would encourage this be a year-long thing, something that you're doing more regularly. But certainly, this is a great time to start, and SBS has a ton of different ways to help with that. And we'll discuss some of those at the end here today. With that said, just from an agenda perspective, we are going to start. We've already started with the introductions. We'll move through that. We're going to talk about the benefits of an educated customer, what that means, and why it's important that they be educated, how you might go about educating a customer, some of the ideas that you might want to incorporate going forward if you're not already doing them, what you might want to educate them about, kind of some hot topics that we feel you might want to be rolling out to people. We'll dive into some of the SBS offerings that we provide. This is something that we're just starting with, by the way. So we've got a ton of different great content that's already available to you, but we do plan on rolling out more as we get closer and closer to Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And then we'll have some takeaways, and if we have some time at the end, good Lord willing, we'll have some time for some questions and answers as well. So that's the agenda. A couple of quick housekeeping things, though. If you do have any questions, please go ahead and use the GoToMeeting box that has been provided. We'll be happy to answer those between Eric and I at the end today. At the same time, once we are finished, we do have a survey. I promise I made it as short as I possibly could. If you don't mind taking that, that's really helpful for me as we can continue to build this out and improve this program going forward. So I would appreciate if you take a couple of minutes to fill that out. All right. So last thing I do want to point out before we jump into the content for today, we do have a big webinar coming up on September 20th about remote work. You're actually going to hear about remote work as one of the topics that Eric is going to discuss a little bit later on in terms of a trending discussion that you might want to have with folks going forward. One of our experts, Linda Hardup, is going to be doing a webinar for the SBS Institute about remote work and securing your devices and data from everywhere. As we all know at this point, people can work from anywhere, but are they actually working safely from anywhere? That's kind of a different topic. So this webinar is going to aim to help you with that. So certainly something I would encourage you to take a look at here. All right, so just quickly, for those of you who are not familiar with SBS, certainly we appreciate you being on the call today. For those of you who are already partners of ours, we really do appreciate that as well. We have been in the industry for 19 years now. We're very excited to celebrate the big 2-0 early next year. And what I think is most important about that is this is what we do. It's what we eat, breathe, sleep, drink. We're not, an accounting firm that decided we could do IT audits, or a managed service provider that said, let us do your network security stuff. No knocks on any of those folks, but this is what we do. We do consulting, auditing, education, products and services, all those sorts of things when it comes to information and cybersecurity. We are endorsed across the country by a variety of, a number of state banking associations. From an educational perspective, we have all kinds of great offerings. We have our monthly Hacker Hour webinar series. We generally get about 500 or so people on that every single month. We've got an SBS Institute where we hand out certifications in different areas of information and cybersecurity. And we are requested pretty commonly and regularly across the country to have speakers come and represent our company at events and things like that. So for those of you that work with us currently, we really appreciate that. For those of you who are less familiar with us, there's a variety of reasons that we believe we're the most trusted name in cybersecurity in the financial services industry. One thing that we really take seriously is the idea of a proactive approach to information and cybersecurity. Rather than the reactive or the passive approach where we're going to do the bare minimum, we're going to hope we get by, and if something comes up, we'll deal with it then. Our goal is that through everything we offer, including the free content we'll talk about a little bit later on, our goal is to drive people to more of a proactive approach, a proactive mentality when it comes to information and cybersecurity. My wife and I celebrated our 14th wedding anniversary last week. And I've come to know in those 14 years that if I unload the dishwasher before I get asked, my life's a lot easier than if I wait to be forced to do it. So be proactive about this stuff, be intentional. Don't just do this stuff for the sake of doing it. Do it because you recognize that by having good practices, having a security awareness culture, and that's something Eric's going to talk a lot about today, having a good security awareness culture in place doesn't mean you're putting in any more effort, really. In fact, there's lots of ways we can help you put in less effort for that. But it really does make a big difference when it comes to being able to deal with this stuff that you're facing on a daily basis, which is, again, evolving on a daily basis. We're here to talk a lot. We're going to talk a lot later on about the different threats that are out there. When it comes to information and cybersecurity, that stuff changes on a daily basis. And only by being proactive and having that mentality of we have an improving process in place, can we really be equipped to do that. Now, I'm talking to you about that from the financial institution or an organization perspective, but the same thing goes for your customers as well. If we can get them to be more proactive and recognize that this is something that's important, then ideally that's going to make them better customers going forward and protect us as well. So something to think about. Again, it's kind of our mantra. How do we make you more proactive when it comes to this stuff going forward? All right, so let's get to kind of the meat of today's discussion. Why does it matter if my customers are educated when it comes to information and cybersecurity? Now, Eric, I'm going to put you on the spot here. You wrote a great blog post pretty recently about this. Why is building a customer base that's educated, that has a good cybersecurity awareness culture, why is that important when it comes to being a financial institution or really any organization that has customers?
Yes. So customers and businesses that may be part of, well, your customer base are going to be a risky area that may not be controlled as well as it could be. Because if we think about a lot of smaller businesses and even individual people inside communities, their security controls are going to be a lot less than the organization like a financial institution, perhaps. So by educating those customers, becoming, even if they're a little bit better, they don't have to be up to the same level as you are, but even if we make them a little bit better, we're helping to mitigate that footprint and close that way in that potential bad guys can get into your network or compromise your network. We use the example a lot of organizations that could be potentially susceptible to corporate account takeover. How well that customer's information may have been lost at no fault of the financial institution. It could have been poor security habits on that business or that individual customer's end. But yet at the end of the day, who's the fingers when they point when their information is lost and they lost a ton of money? If that corporate account takeover scenario was successful. So the organizations, especially financial organizations, are going to be looked upon at a higher level of, well, why aren't you keeping my security, or why aren't you keeping my information safe, when it may not necessarily be the fault of that organization, just poor security practices of that customer. You can even look at uh, healthcare. You can actually put this into many of the other business sectors and individual sectors around and apply this. They that little bit of being better, little bit of training them to be, well, hey, maybe I should actually do some sort of vulnerability scans of my network, or maybe I should buy a reputable malware protection application for my network. Early on, I ran across a small organization that was back in the days of when Windows XP had already been sunsetted. It hadn't been supported for a while, but they were running Windows XP on all their machines. They really didn't have any sort of malware protection. And when we downloaded just a common free malware protection application and ran a scan while we were there, and found just tons of different types of viruses on there. And this organization particularly had a lot of what we'd consider confidential information, like social security numbers, and other parts of that. So just by making them better makes the whole organization better as a whole. So I would
And I think
probably,
the key here is that the bad guys they go for the low hanging fruit, right? I mean, obviously, as a financial institution or large organization, you know, you're probably subject to attacks on a daily basis, but you know, all those folks that their bank is at the end of their hand now, right? We do everything via the, computers or our phones. You know, when was the last time anybody really walked into a branch, right? I mean, we do all this stuff electronically now, and if our customers aren't protecting themselves and we don't know that they're not doing that, and we're not really helping them get better, obviously we're putting ourselves at risk. Is that right?
correct, absolutely. That low hanging fruit example is a great one. And just keeping them one step ahead, making them a little bit more secure, making that bad guy be like, well, it's not really worth my time to invest the amount of my resources into compromising that customer.
So I think we're going to hit on some of. I'm a big statistics guy. Those of you who have been on this webinar in the past probably know that. I've talked about it before. We're going to hit on some of the different topics. And Eric, I'll encourage you to jump in if you have anything to add as we're going through these. But let's just kind of, why does it matter? So because this is a real threat, right? So if we think about the biggest economies in the world, the United States is number one, China's number two, number three, if we counted it this way, would be cybercrime. $8 trillion is what is the projection in 2023. So if you were to take all the countries, all the biggest economies in the world, the third biggest would be the amount of cybercrime that's going on out there. And for you GDP nerds, Germany would be number four, but it's almost half of what the cybercrime piece would be. So again, this is a very real threat, right? These are real losses that are going on out there. A cyber attack is now occurring every 39 seconds is the most recent statistic I've seen. And if you think about that, and I'm, again, big statistics guy, but let's put that in perspective a little bit. The American Dental Association recommends you spend 2 minutes brushing your teeth each morning. That means 3 cyber attacks, almost 4, would be occurring in the span of time that it takes you to brush your teeth if we're all doing the 2 minutes worth. And I'm sure we all are out there. So again, Eric, that's just a good example of how rapid this is happening, right? This isn't something where, these attacks are occurring once a day or anything like that. As you can probably attest to, these are attacks that are happening all the time.
Yes. And a lot of these attacks start out as just merely targets of opportunity. There's not really bad guys out there that wake up one morning and say, well, I'm going to target Eric Chase in particular today. I'm going to hit him and compromise his information. They're more of just like running these automated scanners, looking at IP ranges. Once they find an IP address that has some vulnerability in it, then they're going to start drilling down into that a little bit more. But we're all really just IP addresses on the internet until they actually get into your organization, start doing a little bit more due diligence on who this really is. So I really like this statistic here.
So another one, just quickly, on average, 2,238 our accounts are breached every day. So if you think about all the breaches that are happening over the year, it's more than 2,200 that are occurring on a daily basis. Eric, I know this one's pretty important to you. You're passionate about small businesses. More than half of all cyber attacks are focused on small businesses. And maybe more importantly, 60% of those that are attacked go out of business within 6 months of the attack occurring. So it's easy, and Eric, I'll let you chime in here as well, because you know this better than I do. But one of the pitfalls of trying to educate people sometimes is, how am I a threat? Why would anybody come after me? I'm a little, I have a little cupcake, store that I make my own cupcakes and I sell them. Why would anybody target me? But again, more than half of all cyber attacks are focused on small businesses. And again, 6 out of 10 of them, go out of business within 6 months of that attack. So I'll let you chime in a little bit here, because I know it's something that you've written about before.
You bet. Yeah, the small businesses, they fall into kind of a trap of, well, if I don't need it, why would I spend the money on it for cybersecurity controls? Or just exactly like you were saying, I have a very, very small footprint. I'm only just a small online shop, but they really can't afford a breach once it actually happens. So, educating them too with the being proactive again, and including some of this not just as a cost to the business, but you're actually making the organization better as a whole, and keeping them kind of one step ahead, as like we were talking about before. So it's just really, changing a mindset and kind of a culture too, like we just becoming better. You just want to, and you don't have to become better. They don't have to become better by magnitudes, like we had mentioned before. It's just implementing small things. You could come at them with 10 questions and provide to a small business and say, these are the 10 things that you could be doing to help secure your business. Have a firewall, do some sort of security awareness training, secure your systems a little bit better, do patch management. So all of those, it doesn't have to be earth-shattering questions or earth-shattering training that's provided to them. It's just making them aware of what they can do to be better.
It's almost like buying insurance, right? You would never open up a storefront and not pay for some sort of insurance, but having a vulnerability assessment done once a year, doing a penetration test, something like that, it seems like it could go a long way in preventing you from going out of business if something were to happen.
Exactly.
So we are talking about real losses here. In 2022, the amount of total fraud losses in the United States was 8.8 billion. Now you may be thinking, okay, well, that's 8.8 billion, but what does that mean to us? Well, in the financial services industry, for every dollar that was lost from fraud, it cost US banks $4.36. So you're losing almost 4.5 times as much as your customer might be losing. Because again, and Eric had pointed this out earlier, a lot of customers look at this as, well, the bank's going to make me whole, or I'm not going to have to worry about it because I'm insured. There are real costs to this. So even if kind of the benevolence of helping your customers be better and protecting them isn't resonating, the idea that you can really protect yourself from some pretty significant losses will hopefully motivate folks to again, just really get out there and do their best to use this as an opportunity to start educating going forward. Another big reason is, as we start to try to, customer acquisition is a big thing. That's been something that I know financial institutions are dealing with, and organizations outside that space probably as well. This is a survey from this year, actually, that came out, the relative importance of 20 factors in consumers' choice when it comes to a financial institution. The number one reason there on the left-hand side was security of my personal information. So even more than low or no fees, or convenient locations, or having a great mobile app, The most important thing, and in fact, if you take a look at that from everything from the purple on, the 3 of the 4 most important decision factors that go into deciding which financial institution a customer is going to use are related to fraud and security. Fraud alerts, fraud protection, and then security of my personal information. So one thing that I would encourage you to do, and Eric, I'll encourage, I'll have you jump in here too if you think you'd like to, but maybe use this month as an opportunity to not just educate your customers on what they can be doing, but how you are protecting their information going forward as well. And that's obviously a big factor when it comes to making decisions.
Yes, build that relationship. Show off what you're doing with your customers. Brag about it a little bit, like, hey, we are taking these steps to help ensure that your information is safe. And doing that, builds that customer loyalty. They see what is actually in place, and it makes them feel a little bit more than they're just not kind of a number, to the organization. That is huge with customer confidence.
Building off of that, the same survey, the highest increase in those ratings from 2021 to 2022 were both in the fraud area as well. So fraud protection went from 69 in terms of importance up to 83, and then fraud alerts jumped as well. So to Eric's point and my point, I would just encourage you to use this as an opportunity to really brag about what we're doing to protect your data and how we're going to do that. And by the way, we do have fraud alerts, and maybe you're not subscribed to them. Another thing that came up in the same survey was a lot of consumers were not aware that fraud alerts were available. And if you're making those available, and if you have ways of doing that, certainly it's an opportunity to brag about those going forward.
I've also seen too,
Yeah.
with especially with mobile apps, with a lot of use of mobile apps now, customers may not have an idea that they can set up. You can set up those notifications in the mobile app. Most aren't turned on by default, but you can really kind of tune down those notifications that you get as far as when your card's been used, how much money's been being spent. I have everything turned on with my cards, and I really like to know, like, if my card has been used, how much was it used for, and when. So it keeps me kind of on my toes as well.
So this is a scary one. You guys can be the trusted advisors, and I think Eric can talk to you about some of that. But I believe it was Pew Research this year, when tested on basic concepts of cybersecurity, only 4% of Americans scored a perfect score. And if we're talking about the average score, it was 55%. They got 55% of the basic cyber security concepts correct. So this gives you a wide opportunity, in my estimation, to really educate your customers. There is a gap here. It's something that you are able to fill. And Eric, I know you know this and can speak to this better than I can as well, but financial institutions in particular are in a really good position to educate, because you have to go through all this stuff. You have to have security awareness training. You have to do penetration tests and network security tests and have an IT audit and do security awareness training and all those sorts of things. You're already going through all of this. So you're in a unique position, in my mind, to really be that trusted advisor. And in doing that, hopefully you're tying yourself more closely to that individual, as we saw in those previous slides as well. And Eric, I don't know if you have anything to add there about how scary it is about how advanced or relative lack of advancement, most Americans have when it comes to cybersecurity.
Yes, and if you've been kind of keeping an eye on the cyber news recently, you have seen that how some of these bad guys are leveraging artificial intelligence to create even better ways to social engineer individuals. So the education gap is still staying the same at really relatively low, but the attack vectors, the way that they're going to be exposed, is getting more and more advanced. So we can get perfectly crafted social engineering phishing emails, for example, where you really couldn't tell a difference to even match the tone of the individual who is sending those emails. So it's just being better here, and by working, like we mentioned, by working at even a financial institution, anybody at a financial institution really is magnitudes ahead of their cybersecurity knowledge compared to the average business, to the average consumer.
Yeah, absolutely. So lots of room for growth here, I think is the friendly way to think about this slide. All right, so there's no shortage of scary statistics. We've got more we're going to talk about as we're moving along here, but the two that I really jump out at me on this screen, this one right here, 95% of cybersecurity breaches are caused by human error. That's a pretty common number that gets thrown out there. So if you've seen that one before, good, but if not, I think it really resonates with people. We are the weakest link, and you can have all the technology in the world in place, but at the end of the day, it's still going to be people that are going to be the biggest danger to you. And then this one scares me a lot as well, is cyber fatigue, or apathy to proactively defend against cyber attacks, affects as many as 42% of businesses. So almost, more than 40% of businesses there are just throwing their hands up in the air and saying, I'm exhausted. I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. Every time I do something, it seems like I'm being told I have to do something else or I have to get better. So there's a lot of apathy out there. And I think that's another strategy, another kind of hurdle, I guess, when we do start educating our customers, is how do we do it in a way that shakes them out of that apathy and gets them to understand how dangerous this could be. And so, Eric, I don't know if you have anything to add on any of that as well.
Yes. So a great point here would be stressing and the layers of cybersecurity controls. I always like to use the Shrek analogy of an onion, but each layer, each control that you add adds another layer of security. So if one control fails, it's not the end of the world typically, because you have multiple controls behind that are picking up the slack there. So again, with the education, human errors, like you mentioned, is number one. That's most likely how you will be compromised, is through something that is caused by human error. But what's behind that's going to mitigate that should that first line of defense fail and you're not tied to just any one particular break.
Yeah. One thing, I know we're going to talk a little bit about some strategies around how to educate your customers and things like that in just a moment, but I do believe that statistics and real life examples and being able to create analogies that really hammer home how dangerous this can be, I think it is a big step in the right direction. So, as I mentioned, there's no shortage of scary statistics that are out there. I'm happy to share this slide deck with anybody that's interested in getting access to it. So feel free to reach out to me afterward, or if we can talk about, however we want to share this, we're happy to do it. But get those real life stories, get those statistics, get those ways to really shake people out of that apathy of what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to protect myself? There are ways to do it. All right. So how can we educate? Now, Eric, I'm going to turn this over to you because I know you, again, wrote a really great blog post that we have links to a little bit later on, but kind of the most traditional options, these are some that you wrote about. Kind of talk a little bit about what these look like.
Yeah, so those are probably the most simple things. You can get those out there as multiple times as you like throughout the year, but the posting to your website, the newsletters, flyers, and statement stuffers, you're really trying to cover all the ways that a organization or customer is going to be viewing that information. And these are the most common that we've seen. There are better ways that you can include. I wanted to throw on here too, like adding social media maybe to that traditional option as well, because a lot of organizations now have a social media account, and a lot of have their followers kind of looking at that. But so with those flyers and statement stuffers, anything that's physical, they get dated or can get dated. But if something new that comes out, that some new vulnerability or a new social engineering mechanism is that comes out, those are kind of not going to cover that. So you can expand that to the online portion of the world and keep them keep them up to date. But you're just really trying to cover all the different education channels that you can to make them aware as best you can.
So I kind of think of these as the easy options, right? It's the, okay, I'm going to throw a post on the website and I'm going to hope people read it. Or, I mean, I don't know about you. I don't remember the last time I read a what my statement looked like. So,
Sure.
I think these are really good options and certainly something people should avail themselves of. But I know, our goal is really to start thinking outside the box, right? So, Eric, I'll turn it back over to you, but here are some of the non-traditional options that you laid out in the blog post that you wrote as well, and I'll encourage you to talk about each of these a little bit.
Yeah. And I would almost consider the traditional options a little bit more on the reactive side, but some of these non-traditional options, again, we did have leverage social media here. That one's live. That's you're getting a lot of followers, but I like specifically if you're showing like community town hall events is huge because you are getting people to come to the event. You are maybe putting on some sort of whether it's gamifying it, putting together some sort of games, crosswords, word searches, trivia, but you're kind of building that into those live events. You could offer some prizes with those, but it's a really good way to get people together to show off kind of what you're doing to protect their information, and also to you could even show off some of your services too, so you can kind of promote yourself a little bit during those live events. The same would be with those podcasts and even perhaps webinars. If you do put together maybe one or two of those a year, you can get a larger number of individuals attending, perhaps with the podcasts and webinars, and then having to try and schedule multiple events during like a day to make sure that we have the broadest amount of or most amount of time that individuals can come and attend. But with the podcast and community and webinar for our pieces, you're kind of building that camaraderie. People are getting to talk to each other, and hopefully getting a little bit more getting a little bit more educated there. The provide controls suggested for self-audit support, I think that one is another very powerful tool there. Again, you could keep it really simple, you could make it really complex, but you can scale it to whomever your audience is. Here's our top 10 security controls that you could audit yourself against to see if you have them in place. Here's you could even reference a security guidance that's out there from NIST or the Center for Internet Security. You can build those real world controls that have a lot of potential to reduce risk into your potentially a self audit of them. Um, Again, you could also be, we've seen organizations where the financial institution or the parent organization is going to come in and do maybe a very light audit of their security controls on site of that business to that business, where they'll talk about basically the same things that you're talking about in the self audit, but kind of putting a little bit more emphasis on making sure that they have this in place by calling it kind of that periodic on-site audit. But I really also like the ways to gamify, like I mentioned before, and finding ways to reward good behavior. You don't have to spend a ton of money on like prizes and things like that, but even having just some swag that you hand out for maybe the if an organization is able to give or to implement all those 10 or so security controls that you had provided them, or if they're able to win a Jeopardy game on security, cybersecurity. So it could be just a little swag bag. It could be up to make it a little bit more enticing in terms of prizes. But either way, it's gonna it's making them better. So it's not really a cost. It's making them better. And if we think back to kind of what our average cost to the organization is going to be in terms of data breach, is going to be not that much more expensive than if you actually did have a breach because of that customer, because of that individual. So again, we create stronger customers, more resilient to those cyber attacks, um, and it just, so these will get them more actively involved than just reading an article or listening to, or yeah, reading an article or listening to a video in some cases.
I think the big thing with the non-traditional kind of approach to me is not all customers are the same, right? I mean, everybody learns differently. Everybody has different, media that they follow. Everybody, maybe somebody's on LinkedIn, but they're not on Facebook or whatever the case may be. Everybody kind of has their own way of doing things. And, you just have to be kind of prepared to meet them where they are, right? It's not, this can't be a one size fit all thing. And it doesn't mean you have to do all of these things that are suggested here. Certainly have a traditional approach and then add some of these in there, we would recommend. But the more you can do and the more creative you can get about this stuff, I think it goes a long way. And as Eric mentioned, really just making them better on even an incremental basis. And then the other thing I would mention is, again, using those real life examples, using real life statistics. I love the idea of a Jeopardy game. I think that's a really fascinating approach. And so I think that there's lots of different ways you could do this. Yeah, I think the big thing that we're talking about here, Eric, is just you really actually have to talk to your customers. It can't be something where we're just, we certainly can post stuff on the website and probably should, but at some point we are going to have to engage people if we really want to get through to them. And I know, again, there's some pieces on the slide here that you can speak to in terms of some methods to help with that.
Yes, I really like kind of, again, knowing your audience. So just kind of blasting them with a lot of technical jargon can cause them to kind of lose their focus and kind of go just that blanket stare where they're really not quite understanding. So where's the analogies come into play, the statistics really good are come into play, and boiling kind of down your message into some of the simple takeaways that they can actually use. And again, with helping them understand what's at stake, they are the lowest hanging fruit. So talking with them, you could even show them some examples of organizations that have gone through a cybersecurity event and are no longer, maybe no longer around, or maybe they're struggling financially. And we could also, I wanted to throw in here too, you could, with the step-by-step instructions, again, there's that, here's how you could install, malware protection on your computer. Here's some providers that we know are reputable. Here are some ways that you can do better with patch management. All of making it as simple as possible is going to increase the chances of success that those items are going to be completed. And you can even call in or reference to some higher level. You're that trusted advisor, but if you are kind of not really comfortable, or if you want to include that, you could put in some of these like FBI or Secret Service articles or references to them, or resources more or less, that could help. And even engaging your local police department too, if it's something that's done on site, or maybe even a interview style or quote from them to be included in those instructions. So it's really just setting them up to be the best that they can, and making it as easy for them to do it.
Excellent. Okay. So let's get into some trends. So it's easy enough to say, okay, we're fired up. We want to do this. We want to start educating our customers. What should we be talking about? Now, the Cybersecurity Awareness Month, this year, the 4 areas of focus are enabling multi-factor authentication, using strong passwords in a password manager, updating your software, and then recognizing and reporting phishing. So those are going to be the 4 pieces that the Cybersecurity Awareness Month, all the different content that's coming out from that organization is really going to focus on those 4 areas. And I think, Eric, we would agree those are 4 really critical areas, and I'll encourage you to maybe pick 1 or 2 of those and talk a little bit about those before we get into some of the other trending topics that we had in mind, but I wanted to make sure we highlighted this as well.
Yes. Multi-factor authentication, probably my number 1. If anything that supports multi-factor authentication is going to be huge as far as a security control that's in place, including strong passwords and password managers with the multi-factor. I think they go more hand in hand in there. And then updating your software would be my number 2, making sure your software is up to date, keeping that. So they're all, and then phishing would be number 3, and recognizing phishing.
Why would you say it's important from obviously we're going to talk a little bit about phishing as a trend overall here in a second, but I thought the reporting of the phishing was an important piece of this that we don't always talk about as much. Do you want to cover that a little bit, why that's important?
Yeah, so with phishing, as an organization, phishing emails come in, that user who gets that phishing email might just be like, oh, this is garbage, and just delete it. But if they're not reporting on that phishing and letting like the information security officer know, you could be under more of a large scale phishing attack than just a single phishing phishing email that's coming in, even like to the point where we don't want to necessarily penalize people for reporting that they maybe have clicked on a phishing email. The idea here is that they're talking about it and they're like, hey, I messed up. I might have clicked on a phishing email. I'm letting the information security officer know right away so they can start kind of looking at that, looking and see if there was actually malicious software there and containing that breach if it was indeed a malicious software that was able to get in, as opposed to them just clicking on it, not saying anything, and then letting that linger on the network for months at a time before that bad actor actually chooses to do something about it and exfiltrate information. Because most bad guys, they are going to sit on the network for a period of time. They're not going to act right away if they're able to get malware on a system. And then they'll wait and wait and wait, and then when everything kind of cools down, then they'll go and start exfiltrating kind of data as their part. So it's that reporting piece is a pretty big part of phishing prevention, because you have that response piece, and you have that incentive piece for employees to actually report on it.
And I also think it's important. I mean, if Eric is good enough to catch a phishing email, but Brett's not, Eric reporting allows the organization to really say, hey, we need to be on the lookout for this. This is a phishing email that we received or one of our employees received. You might want to be on the lookout for it. It obviously allows other folks at the organization or institution to just be more prepared as well, right?
Yeah. Yes, because if I was going to phish an organization, I'm not sending it out to one person. I'm going to be sending it out to as many known organization email addresses as I can, because you're casting that net. You're hopefully getting that, even if 1% clicks on the 100 emails that you sent, that's still a win for that bad guys for that phishing assessment. So it's just one time. You have to get lucky once.
Yeah. So those are the 4 that you're probably going to hear a lot about, but just some other ones that we thought we'd cover relatively quickly here. Phishing's the big one. So we're going to go from talking about phishing to talking about phishing a little bit. 3.4 billion phishing emails are sent daily. That number is almost so big as to be meaningless to me. So I thought I would put it in some context here. That's like if every man, woman, and child in the state of California sent 103 emails every day. That's what we're talking about here. So obviously a lot of phishing emails going out on a daily basis. And Eric, I know we're preaching to the choir here, I'm sure on this one, but phishing's the number one and kind of the most common attack vector, right?
It is the way that you will be compromised. It's so easy for me to send out massive amounts of phishing emails and automatically, and then you get into the spear phishing too, where you tweak those emails to look a little bit more like it's something from that organization, and then you get into the AI based phishing where it's looking almost identical. So it's a pretty big vector.
Yeah. Now, phishing is just one type of social engineering. I'm sure other folks or people on the call are familiar with this, but I actually feel like I'm getting more text phishing attempts than I am getting emails anymore. So that smishing up there at the top is a really popular one. That's your text-based phishing. You have the vishing, the robocalls, and things like that. Obviously, we've talked about social media quite a bit today. There's really good things about social media, as we all know, but certainly it's a possibility for social engineering as well. Physical impersonation probably doesn't happen quite as often anymore, but it's certainly something to think about. And then foreign media devices, right? If I drop a USB drive on the sidewalk in front of somebody's business and label it 2023 tax information, somebody picks it up and sticks it into a computer, that could be a bad thing as well. So Eric, I'll encourage you, if there's anything that stands out on the screen, any one of these that seems more important than the other, I'll let you jump in here.
I did want to touch with those foreign media devices. Organizations can say that, well, we disable USBs across the organization. They're just not going to work if we plug them in. However, you can purchase, they're commercially available, they're USB-like devices that you can preload with code and software to run a certain thing, and when it's plugged into a computer, even if you have that USB restriction in place, it authenticates or it contacts the computer as a peripheral, like a mouse or a USB keyboard, and is ignored. So you can bypass that USB restriction, and then you have that device ready to run whatever code piece that you would like. And then the phishing too, and the smishing, well, more smishing than phishing. The amount of organizations, your cell phones, we typically don't do much for malware protection on cell phones. It's really good to have a piece of malware protection on there, but if you send you a link in a smishing and you click on the link and it goes out to download that piece of malicious software, then they're just like mini computers. As we all know, phones are basically a computer. So it's another way of accessing that information or getting access to that device.
So even as we're trying to put preventative things in place and controls in place to mitigate threats, we're obviously dealing with smart people on the other end as well. So definitely something to think about from a social engineering perspective. Access controls, I'm sure I'm not going to make anybody guess here, but the most common password in 2023 was the most common passwords. The first one was 123456. Second one was a little bit more complex. That's 123456789, and then we have the always popular QWERTY as well. I don't know, for anybody on the webinar today that's probably over 35, Spaceballs, the Mel Brooks spoof of Star Wars, did this whole bit about the password being 12345, and it kind of scares me that in the year of our Lord 2023, all we've really done since then is add a 6 at the end of it. So I know most of the people on the call here obviously have strong passwords and know why strong passwords are important. But I think the reality of the situation is, if we go back to that kind of basic security concepts and how many people score perfect scores on those, I think there's a pretty big gap in people's mind about whether or not a password is secure or not. So Eric, I don't know if you have anything to add to that at all.
It's been the most common password for quite a few years, you can, by just being that the password for the last few years, you can see that they're not really changing.
It's pretty scary. Remote access security. I'm just going to take one more second here to plug a whole webinar that we'll be doing on this topic next week. But Eric, I'll encourage you. Yet I couldn't come up with any cool stats for this one. So why don't you give me a little bit background on what we're talking about when we discuss remote access security? A little bit of flavor here.
So, COVID kind of put a lot of businesses scrambling on implementing some sort of remote work piece into their organization, and they may not have, without like a true methodical plan of implementing it. It was done really quickly at some organizations, but with that remote access security, you're really ensuring that those devices that are now being able to connect into your network, which you may or may not have control over. Most will have like laptops that are allowed to connect in that are managed, but you're really making sure that you have the proper controls in place to have them connect to your systems, to the internal systems, without compromising the security that's out there. Because now you're bringing in another network that they're that they're on. They're bringing in now you have maybe more people that are available, like family members could have access to this remote device now. Or if that device may have a better chance of being lost or stolen now. So it's just, this is huge with remote workers, and making sure that you're not opening up a new hole into your network.
So I'm going to buzz through some of these a little bit more quickly, just because I want to make sure we get to some of the SBS content. Encryption's a big one that we talk about. So there's some pretty startling statistics about the lack of small businesses in particular that are using encryption. This is a good one, the Internet of Things and mobile device security. The average US household had 22 devices connected to the internet in 2022. In preparing for today's webinar, I was talking to Eric and I said, I feel like I've got way more than 22, including a robot vacuum. And I said, well, I can't imagine they would get much information out of that. And he's like, well, they could get your floor plan. They could understand where the doors and windows are probably. So even when you think something's safe and might not be, you need to be keeping up on firmware updates and things like that and patches. Certainly, I would think twice about that. And so this might be a good opportunity to talk to people about. And Eric, you just talked about this actually, right? Mobile device security. We don't necessarily think of our phones as mini computers all the times, but that's what they are. Our watches, my refrigerator. I've got multiple Alexas. There's all kinds of things connected to the internet, and they all need to be protected going forward. Malware awareness. This is a cool stat as well. 560,000 new pieces of malware are detected daily. Again, I don't know what that number means, so let's put it in context. If every piece of malware were a person, that would fill almost 7 NFL stadiums. So, obviously lots of different malware being created and put out there on a regular basis, which certainly makes it difficult for our antivirus software and things like that we're counting on us to protect us to really make sure it does that. Is that fair to say?
Yes. Yep. And then you kind of get into the world of those advanced anti-malware devices, which are looking more, instead of just signature based, to more behavioral based and blocking based off of that instead of just the signature. So really helps with zero-day vulnerability management with those advanced malware.
And then the last big one is incident response. Only 45% of companies say they've got an incident response plan in place currently. That's obviously something we need to think about, because the old adage, I don't know that I totally agree with it, but it's kind of not if, but when you get breached. I think you can, if you do things correctly, you obviously minimize that chance probably, but having a plan to fail well is obviously a big part of what we talk about a lot of the time as well. So lots of different topics. I would encourage you, I'm going to have our contact information up here at the end. Certainly we'd be happy to talk about those as well. Just from an SBS content perspective, as we start to wrap things up today, there's all kinds of free stuff that we provide. One big thing, and I will tell you if you ask for the slide deck, and I apologize I didn't attach it here, I somehow always forget to do that, but I'm happy to send it recordings of this webinar or the slide deck or anything you need from us, and please let us know. But these are all hyperlinked so you can actually get this information. This is actually Eric's article. We've talked about it quite a bit today already. It's a customer cybersecurity awareness and creating a culture of security. I think it's a fantastic article. I would encourage you to take a look at that. This is our big thing that we're rolling out for this year so far. It's our Security Awareness Toolkit. Our goal here is that you can grab and take what you need from it. So I actually pulled it up already. It's a Word document. If you go to our website, you can download it. But it's basically got a bunch of different SBS resources built into it. We have some information about why it's important, some of the stuff we've already talked about. I'm scrolling past the things I want to talk about, so I apologize. We do have social media posts that you all are welcome to come in here, grab, customize, different topic ideas you might want to consider, best practices that you might be able to use. We've got all kinds of little tips of the month, these little things that you can use as backgrounds and all kinds of stuff like that. Just lots of different great things in this document. So I would certainly encourage you, if you take nothing else away from today's webinar, I would encourage you to go to our website and download that. And again, it is hyperlinked in this slide. So either go to our website and you can search for it, or feel free to reach out and we'll be happy to provide it. So we do have the Security Awareness Toolkit. We've got all kinds of posters that you're welcome to download. So I know, posters might not be the most exciting thing in the world, but it does give an opportunity for you to provide your customers these that they can put up in their office, or just download and read them. I mean, it's a good opportunity to, again, remind them of some of the different things they need to be concerned about. And we've got infographics that are up there on the website, and then we have a full resource library as well. So these are all free things that we provide. Would encourage you to go on the website and check them out. If you go to our www.sbscyber.com, there's a drop down for education and free downloads. They're all there. You're welcome to come in and grab stuff if you need it. On the non-free stuff division, if you do have customers that are struggling, if you have people that you want to refer to get help, if you just want to put some information out there and say, hey, this company can help you, we do offer all kinds of great things as well. So I just wanted to point out some of these. We do offer full security awareness training, so certainly that would be an option. Network security testing, if you haven't, if your customers, obviously small business customers, are not doing any network security testing, we would absolutely encourage them to do it. We've got different consulting options we can provide. KnowBe4, for those of you who are familiar with that, or unfamiliar rather, it's a great phishing training and development tool. So you can actually test your users, your employees, make sure that they're, just kind of get them in the mindset of having phishing top of mind, and be more careful about what they're reading, and making sure they're not clicking on links to emails that they shouldn't be. The idea here is if we test them enough and they're doing it in a secure environment where clicking on a link isn't gonna be terrible for us, ideally when they get a real phishing email, they'll be better prepared for it. We do have a brand new incident response retainer that we're offering as well in partnership with Arctic Wolf. So I think I may have just misspelled their name, so I apologize on that. But certainly if you are interested in kind of getting some help from an incident response perspective, we do have some options there. And then we do have our track tool as well. So we, if anybody on the call is familiar with track, that's our 11 module tool that helps automates different pieces of the information security program, risk assessments, vendor management, business continuity management. That can be used not just for financial institutions, obviously, but in a variety of settings as well. So, in addition to all the free stuff we offer, if you do have customers that need additional help, we certainly would be more than happy to, to contact them or have you refer them, and we'd be happy to help them. So just some takeaways really quickly. An educated customer is a better customer, not just for themselves, obviously, but for your institution or organization. Cybersecurity threats are real, expensive, and not going anywhere anytime soon. This is the reality we're dealing with. Your customers don't know what they don't know, and sometimes they have no idea where to start. Cybersecurity Month, however, is a great place to start, but developing and maintaining a dedicated cybersecurity culture is an ongoing process. When you're educating your customers, a mix of traditional and non-traditional offerings is probably your best bet. There's all kinds of topics you can cover and no shortage of resources to help you build that content out. And then obviously we've got a variety of different ways, both free and not free, to help you and your customers both be more proactive and better protected. So lots of different ways we can help. Now, I'm going to see if we had any questions come in. I think we had a couple, so I'm going to just read these off. And Eric, I'll, if anybody, I don't get to anybody's before they jump off here. I know we're kind of at the hour. I'll make sure we follow up. How do you brag about your cyber posture if one of your vendors was impacted by a vulnerability? So let's say, you know, you had a vendor that had an issue. You know, that doesn't necessarily eliminate your ability to certainly go out and make sure your customers know that you're doing your absolute best, right?
Right. So you can, with that, the vulnerability was on the vendor's side. So you had done, or you would show that, or you would say how you had protected what you had done to protect that on your side, but you'd really more say that cybersecurity is really a comprehensive thing, and we have vendors that we may or may not rely on to help protect information, and so our attack footprint is pretty big, and we are doing vendor management as part of what we do to help mitigate those vulnerabilities. But with that one, that's a tough one, because that one again is true. It's like the other way where you're doing what you can, and then it's on a vendor that may have been breached. So lessons learned from that may be, do we need to do more as part of our vendor management of that vendor to ensure that that vulnerability doesn't happen again, or that a breach doesn't happen again.
And then the last question, I'll just, I know people are probably jumping off here, but just so we can get to this one too, but what do we recommend regarding passwordless logins, the ones where they send you an email or code or a login link to the email? Do we have any suggestions around that at all?
You know, that one I will actually get with our consultant team on, because I'm not quite sure of the answer on that one right now.
Right. Well, we will be certain to follow up with that person directly. But with that said, again, thanks everybody for jumping on. Sorry we went a minute late here. Eric, really appreciate your time today. Thanks for all your expertise and all your work putting this together with me. Thanks everybody for coming on board. If there's anything we can do to help out, please feel free to let us know, and I'm going to leave our contact information up here for another few minutes. But thanks again to everybody, and hopefully we'll see you at the next Cyber Showcase next month. So thanks again, and have a great afternoon.